every power has a distinct signal, which means that when you are reading someone, there will be that source power will have like the highest ratio of energy signal that is being sent out, which we call the distinct signal. There are 8 distinct signals to go along with the powers. We have the Zhi poignancy and the Zai inflappability, the Ni buoyancy and V amped, the Ni dissatisfaction and Vi concern, and the Z bracing and the G caring. Those are the 8 distinct signals. So you can use it as an example. Jack McBrayer and Jim Parsons, they're both Nest Towers. One is a Zai Ni and one is a Zhi Ni. Jack McBrayer Zhi Ni, Jim Parsons Zai Ni. So they'll share some similar things, but that distinct signal will be different. So with James McBrayer, you'll see that Zhi poignancy as his distinct signal, whereas with Jim Parsons, you'll see the Zhi inflappability as the distinct signal. So there may be some similarities shared, but that's a distinct signal that you can start honing in on to differentiate and to start reading people. Next up we have 4th gear. What is 4th gear about? Well, 4th gear is about starting to tell the distinctions, the variations, the game styles within a particular mojo. We call those riffs. At this point of reading, it gets more tacit. So you're reading those individual cues of the pod powers in the fields, and then you're telling the conflagration of cues, but you're picking up on more tangible things and you're going more tacit as it goes on. There are different game styles that you have within a mojo, and it's really cool because it gives you like a lot of advanced information on a person at this point, on a human, because you're not just reading their particular configuration, but also how they project that and use that configuration that they have to engage their powers. There's a variety of riffs, so you can have riffs that are physiological, there are riffs that are just the gesturing, or just the mouth, or it can be developmental riffs. One of the really awesome things about when you start reading and you get up to those higher levels with the 4th gear is you start seeing all these different connections between humans. So like start really seeing the human matrix, seeing like the variations, the commonalities, like the different mojos, and then the variations of playing styles within them and how they all connect. You can start seeing, your similarities with like your, people from different nationalities, genders, physiology, it's just sexual orientations, it just creates this common bond with other humans, which is a crucial thing, and for us as humans to be able to move to the next level and really ups, your EQ level, as it were. So you definitely have to be, you can't help but have to be cool with your fellow human when you start to mojo read. Then we get into the highest gear, which is gear 5. Gear 5 is all about how the energy signals, how everything hits you, and so it can be very much of an unconscious process at first. It's the most tacit of the gears in reading. So it's about how someone hits you and your state of mind also as you're reading that person. So it takes a lot of mastery, self-mastery, and awareness to really be aware of your own processes and therefore in your state of mind, therefore how you're actually reading all other humans, the environment, everything around you, how your lens is configured, as it were. And that's a really tricky thing, it's something that definitely requires some hardcore kensei to master this gear. Because it is so much about state of mind, gear 5 is very, sensitive. A lot of things can affect it, such as stress. When you're stressed, things are going to hit you differently, and you're going to be off when you read, so you have to be aware of that. Fatigue also, so you won't read as well when you're fatigued, as when you're not, because certain, fears, insecurities, whatever will come up in the reading process when you are tired. And also things such as attachment. So if you have like a really good friend or family member who's there as you're reading, you can have those unconscious projections from that other person on you as you're reading, so that they can hem you in from, actually having a clear picture, clear read of another human. There are all these different factors that affect you when you're reading. So you want to be in an ideal state of reading. It is what we call quasi-state. That's when your conscious and unconscious are communicating with one another. And that's when your unconscious can give you the most help to your conscious when you're reading, and give you the most and best information. So that's what you want to try to be at when you're doing reading. That's really like when you're going to have the clearest lens. You're going to be able to make your reads in a much, in the most clear and accurate way. So you want to try to be in that state when you're doing your readings. And so we'll talk about how to get into that state. An important thing to note about Mojo reading is that you won't always be in your ideal state. Mojo reading is a process that goes along concurrently with your development process, and with any learning process, you have times when you're going along and you're learning how to Mojo read, and then you think you've gotten to a really solid point, and you're making accurate guesses on all these different people and reading really well, and then you'll come to like someone and you'll try to read them and you'll get an incorrect answer, something that was totally out of your field of vision. It's normal. That will happen with the learning process. You just have to, your confidence, like it's happened to us, here in Podler as, the students, it happens, where you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have wrong reads, and that's going to, your confidence is going to drop, and when that happens, you just have to remodel. You have to come back to the table and say, why did that happen? And a lot of times it has to do with your own apparatus and developing that and realizing that you had maybe some bias that you didn't realize that you had, but now that you're aware of it, you can calibrate your lens so that you read correctly going forward. And that's just part of the process with Mojo reading. You just have to be comfortable with the process of remodeling. Just really allow yourself that. Don't be too hard on yourself with this learning process. It really is a continual life process. It's the funnest thing ever, but it is a process, and you'll have those, ups and downs, but just keep going. Allow yourself to have those times where you have mistakes, where your confidence gets rocked, and then you have to just, take those learning lessons, absorb them, but recover, and then come back. And when you'll be stronger, you'll be more confident, you'll have more accurate reads, and you'll go on from there. Reading humans is very much an art, so think of it as you're reading a work of art. You have to approach it in that way in order to really be able to appreciate it. It's very much, we talked about the pot powers, like an artist's palette. When you put it all together into configuration, you're putting it into a work of art. So you have a human, it's a work of art. You need to approach it in that way and honor them in order to really get a proper read of someone. And if you can't put yourself into that state of mind, then you really shouldn't be doing reading, because you should be excited about, what you're reading. One thing that you'll find as you start being able to read other people is that you'll have to deal with, having people respect your process, because you'll have those ideal states of reading. You have to be in a certain state of mind. We talked about, needing to be detached. So attachment is is something that you need to deal with and will affect your reads. And you might find that once people realize that you can read, they will start asking you for reads, and you might not at that time be in a good state of mind to actually be doing the reads. So just one of the things that you'll need to do is start managing that relationship with the world as they start learning that you can do this, and start having them understand how reading works, what the process is, and articulating that to them so they can understand that reading is not a light task, and that they should respect the process of doing it. I just told you about the 5 gears of Mojo reading, so what has the Podlayer team done with this language so far? Well, we've read 20,000 plus people, or samples as we call them, so far, and our goal is to have a list of 10,000 people that are famous or relevant, have enough media so everybody could look at it, and so far we have 494 samples in our shiny chart available to you. So we'll be building that up to that 10,000 magic number. So why is this 10,000 list, the virtual village, so important? Well, first, this is a universal case. These samples, the 10,000 different samples, will be ones that anyone, anywhere can go to their computer, to YouTube or some other video provider and look at ample footage from these people, and so we can share ideas and train people anywhere around the world, and that is really, really important. The virtual village is also groundbreaking proof of concept to demonstrate that the phenomenon is indeed real. The virtual village also includes different mojos from different backgrounds, different stories that will illustrate to anyone who's looking at the connections between all humans, between yourself and all the people in the virtual village, and all of those in your environment and beyond. So imagine yourself having learned how to read Mojo, going out there to anywhere in the world and being able to see the world with unprecedented eyes, see what's truly going on, see the stories that are happening in front of everyone's eyes that they don't even know about. This is the essence of Mojo journalism, and the virtual village is just the start to show you how to be able to do that. As you start looking at the people that we've included in the virtual village, you'll start noticing some very interesting patterns that are existing in fields across the world. For example, one that we found really interesting is seeing a predominance of Vaiji mojos in politics. Now that's very telling from a Mojo journalism perspective. We'll get into that, but it's very telling, these patterns that form within certain fields, different ways of life, really inform on the story of the world, what's really occurring out there. These patterns also demonstrate the fact that the current reads of so-called experts in people reading and their general conceptions about Mojo spreads in different fields, ways of life in general, are very off. Another thing we'll be talking about a lot in this show is social alchemy and how it relates to people dynamics. You have people that are emanating pod power signals at all times that are interacting with other people who are also emanating their own pod power signals, and the resulting effects on the dynamics can be studied objectively through social alchemy. Check out the episode 7 of the Podlayer Planet Show to find out all about social alchemy. To really help illustrate the social alchemy relationships, there are different groupings that go from your own mojo, the one cell, the recognition, to the all, to the collective. And there are 20 different groupings. You start off with the design recognition, and that is your own mojo. For me, that would be Jaini. which is my mojo. Then you have the groupings that inform on the relationships of two, so the pairs, like the inspirational pair, which will tell you about the story between yourself and your other, and all the other different mojos and their inspirational pair. For me, that would be the jeunesse pairing, Jaini and Jinai, and that gives me a lot of information about how I work consciously and my unconscious works, and all the real life forms of Jaini and Jinai and how they work. Then you have the same source pair, which, as the name indicates, refers to the two mojos that have the same source power. For me, that would be the power of Jai, so it would be the Jai Alpha, so it would be the Jaini and the Jai V. So there are similarities that are shared between both because they both have the same source power of Jai, and that's something that you could focus and hone in on when you look at those pairings and how they relate. So have the inverse mojo pair, which refers to the two mojos that have the source and tandem power switched. For example, the Jai Ni and the Ni Jai would be the inverse mojo pairing, and that is a relationship that can be really helpful because it can help a person develop their own tandem power by seeing how that a person with a very similar mojo is using it as their source, and they can help each other flex that tandem power and develop themselves. So it's a very beneficial pairing to study and to understand. Then you start looking at social alchemy from the perspective of larger groups of four, the quartets. You have the source song quartet, which represent the four mojos that are on the same channel. So the Jez Alpha, which would have either Ji or Jai as their first power, the source power, and that really helps you understand the other mojos that are in that same channel, how you relate to them, what the dynamics are between the four mojos that comprise that quartet. So you have Jez Alpha, you have Nez Alpha, you have Vez Alpha, you have Zez Alpha. There's a storyline quartet, which is comprised of the mojos that share the same primary discernment and perception. Like the romantic quartet, of which I'm a part of, has the four mojos that share the Nez power and the Jez power. So it would be the Nai Ji, the Ni Jai, the Jai Ni, and the Ji Nai. Those would be the four mojos in that. And that quartet or that grouping helps you understand, because all of these mojos have the same way of looking at the world, the perceiving, pulling information, and also making decisions or understanding the world. So it gives you a lot of information from that perspective of what do the four mojos that share that same gathering of information and understanding of the world process, how do they think? How does that grouping think? The chain flow quartet comes from a perspective of a four-phased flow of a person's native perception. It represents a scale between a person's comfortability with risk and change as opposed to repetition and stability. The higher a person's Nez power is in their ranking, the more comfortable they'll be with risk and change, as opposed to the higher a person's Vez power is in their ranking, the more comfortable they'll be with repetition and stability. I, for example, am part of the second wave quartet, which comprises the four mojos that have the Nez power as their tandem power. So that would be Jai Ni, so Ni as the second power, and then the Ji Nai, which have the Nez power as their tandem power as well, and then you have the Zai Ni and the Zi Nai. So all the mojos in that quartet will share that same way of working, which will give you a lot of insight into yourself and others and how people relate as far as their change flow ranking. Then we have the Special Club Quartet. What is that? Special Club Quartet is comprised of the four mojos that share the same perception and also the same way of getting energy, either from the outer environment or the inner environment. So for example, I'm part of the subjective interpretives. Who are those? Those are the Jaini, those are the Naiji, those are the Zaini, and those are the Naizi. So all of those share the Nez power as their top perception, and also get energized by their inner world. And so that helps you understand, the commonalities between the mojos that operate that same way, have that same common language and, environment, native environment. Gives you a lot of information about yourself, how you gather your energies, how you understand the world, and how those other mojos that operate the same way will react to things and understand the world, and also how they relate to other quartets. The Brain Quad Location Quartet refers to the mojos that share the same priority and how those mojos relate to one another. So back here on the right you have the Towers, which I'm a part of, call those subjective discerners. Up here you have the Gatherers. Back on the left here you have the Hunters, and up here in the front left you have the Fighters. So they all share the same priority, and that will color the way that they understand the world, the way that they act, what they're going for, what their priority is, says a lot about them and how they will relate to others and to each other, of course. I'm part of the Towers, the subjective discerners, which are the Jaini, the Zaini, the Zaivi, and the Jaivi. And they all share the same priority, which is to be at equilibrium, the Towers, to hold it at equilibrium. They're part of the compass bearings. And so to understand the relationships between those four and how they share that same priority and what does that mean, it helps you really, stretch yourself in a comfortable way, help you understand the connections between the four of you, and of course how you relate to all the other mojos. Shades of Consciousness Quartet is comprised by the four mojos that share the same four conscious powers, but in different ratios. For example, for me it would be the four mojos that share the same conscious powers of Jai and Ni and Vi and Z, but they'll be in different ratios. And it helps you to stretch yourself because you can see the other mojos that have the same powers as you do, but just in different ratios. So it can really help you understand how that power can be used when it's in a different ranking, and also then help you open your horizons and develop yourself. The Perception Quartet, as the name indicates, it's all four mojos that share the same perception, primary perception. And so this helps you hone in on your powers. Both this one and the next one that I'll talk to you about helps you hone in to that specific power, in this case the perception powers. For me, for example, my grouping is the Ni Dancing Eyes Quartet. And so it would be all of the four mojos that share Ni as their top perception. So the Jai Ni, the Ni Jai, the Zai Ni, and the Ni Zai. So those are the four mojos that I'd be in the grouping with. And so that really helps you understand the power of Ni and how it can be used. When you see Ni used as a primary with my same power that I have as my source, the Jai, for example, as the tandem, as a second power, or for example the Ni used with a Zez power, with the Zai. That's a different flavor, and it can help you understand how else Ni can be used. It can help you stretch yourself, stretch the understanding of yourself, help because you have an understanding of the larger breadth of use of that power. Same thing with the Discernment Quartet. Discernment Quartet, of course, focuses on the primary discernment power, and so that hones in on that discernment power. How do people understand the world primarily, and who are the four mojos that share that same type of understanding? I'm part of the Jai Face Quartet, for example, which is comprised with the four mojos that share Jai as their primary discernment, as their primary way of understanding the world. So Jai Ni, Ni Jai, the Jai Vi, and the Vi Jai. And so all of those have as their primary way of understanding the world the emotive resonating, and the keeping at equilibrium and harmony. And so when you see those 4 mojos and how you are and how they are, and how they use the Jai, that really helps you hone in on the power of Jai and what all of its flavors are, capabilities, can help you stretch your own person and connect to those other Jai mojos. Those were the quartets, and now you're looking at the octates. You're looking at it from larger grouping. So those were subsets, the quartets that we talked about. Now we'll be looking at the octates. There's the adaptive directive octate, which is comprised with the mojos that start on the right, the adaptive mojos, the 8, and the 8 mojos that start on the left, the directive mojos. I'm adaptive because my powers of Jai and Ni start on the right side of the brain. So I'll share characteristics with the other 7 mojos that start also on that side of the brain that are also adaptive. So have the free form and unstructured thought as their primary, versus the directives who start on the left side of the brain, and they'll have structured thoughts, and concept of time and language is native to that side of the brain. So you can really see here the commonalities that you have with those other mojos that start on the same side of the brain as you do, and of course then how you relate to the other side, the directive or adaptive, depending on which side of the equation you're on. You have the subjective and objective octates, which is comprised of the 8 mojos that are oriented to the outer world, so the objectives, and those 8 mojos that are oriented towards the inner world or get energized by the inner world, the subjectives. I'm part of the subjectives, so I get energized by the inner world primarily, and that tells you a lot about yourself when you start looking at things from that field as well, and how you relate to the other 8 mojos that are in the different field than you are. The interpretive literal octate refers to the 8 mojos that focus on gathering detail type information, so those would be the literal mojos, versus those who focus on gathering pattern-based information, who would be the interpretives. I'm part of the interpretive mojos because I have Ni as my primary perception, which means that I'm picking up patterns in real time. And so that again will tell me a lot about how I work, how I connect to others. There's the logic-based, values-based octate, which hones in on those 8 mojos that have the logic-based power as their main discernment versus the 8 mojos that have the values-based power as their main discernment. I would be a values-based mojo because I have Jai as my primary discernment, and so I can look at the other 7 mojos within that grouping and see how they relate, because they are values-based, but they do have some differences and then connections, and this grouping helps you see those. You can also look at social alchemy in terms of the perception modulation octets, which would be the 8 mojos that share the same perception balancing. For me, it would be the Vi and the Ni. Those would be my 2 perceptions that I have as my conscious powers, the Ni first and then the Vi, and how they counterbalance one another. That will tell you a lot about yourself and about the other people that have that same modulation counterbalance in their perception and their way of gathering information, and about how the other ones work as well. Discernment modulation octates refer to the 8 mojos that have the same discernment counterbalance. It would be either the Z and the Jai or the Ji and the Zai. Having the same discernment modulation will impart some commonalities, also some differences, will help you stretch yourself by understanding how that component, how that modulation works in different mojos. There's also the lead corridor octates, which refer to the 8 mojos that either share as their lead, as their source power, a discernment or a perception. Since I have as my source power the power of Jai, which is a discernment power, I'd be considered a lead discerner. So for example, there's the Ni Jai, who is similar to me because we have the same 2 top powers, but a Ni Jai would have as their source power a perception power. And although the source power and the tandem, the first and the second power, we always say they do work together at all times, it does color things that you have a discernment power first versus a perception power. So an understanding power versus a gathering of information power as your first power, and the power that gives you the most energy. So it's really good to study that, to understand yourself, to understand others, and understand, start really stretching yourself by looking at mojos that are similar to you but have a perception as opposed to a discernment, or vice versa. And finally, you have the complete set, all 16 mojos, because at the end of the day, you are connected to everyone else, to every other mojo, and everyone is one with the all. Through social alchemy, you keep stretching yourself, and at the end of the day, you understand all of the connections that you share with all of your beautiful fellow humans. It's important to note that everyone has alchemies that are going on, even when they're by themselves. Because even when you're by yourself, you still have your memories of your friends, the people that you've been with in your life, your own spirits, even the building that you're in right now has an energy, has an alchemy to it. So you're never isolated from the phenomenon of social alchemy. Social alchemy really helps with mojo reading, especially when it comes to fourth gear riffing. So when you see a different mojo manifested in different people with different playing styles, that's a fourth gear riff. And for example, because of that, fourth gear riff, other romantics will pop out to me, because I see that connection that I have with romantics, and I'll see it manifest in people out there. We'll also be focusing in on inspirational relationships in the show. And inspirational relationships are those pairings of peaking partners. So partners that, because of their powers that they have, they inherently energize and inspire one another, which will then in turn help each other peak. These are very important relationships because it helps you connect directly with your unconscious genius and learn how to develop that and really have that communication with your unconscious genius, which is so crucial for anyone to peak, to get more energy, and to succeed. All the different inspirational relationships are beautiful and have something unique and great to tell about the story of humanity. And we'll be discussing all different kinds of ones, like Ice-T, who's an IZ, and Coco Austin, who's a Nizai, inspirational. Also Prince William, who's a Vaiji, and Kate Middleton, who's a Vijay. And inspirational relationships, because this is a way of connecting with your unconscious genius, can not only be between two people, but also with other things. Like sometimes people project what we call their unconscious genius onto a different land that they want to go to, they have this longing for. Or with any other spiritual connection, intangible connection. It doesn't have to be a physical person that you project that other onto. Many people have different projects that they project their unconscious genius onto that inspires them and gives them energy. For me, for example, it would be this show. This show definitely gives me that connection with my other.